Welcome back. All right, so we are going to jump right back into team histories. We're going to get into the history of the New Jersey Devils. The New Jersey Devils, of course, were a relocated team. They came from Colorado, the Colorado Rockies, a team that didn't experience any level of success after they had moved from Kansas City, where they had been the Scouts. It had been a really rough go for this organization, and it didn't get better in New Jersey, especially out of the gate. This was seen as a franchise that just was a complete failure, and maybe folding it might be a good idea. This was the team that Wayne Gretzky at one point referred to as a Mickey Mouse organization. Now, Edmonton had absolutely trounced them. It was understandable. But the idea was that they were kind of an embarrassment to the league. Well, the good news for New Jersey fans was that Sean Burke came along and had a pretty ridiculous run in the playoff to kind of shed that view that New Jersey was never going to have any level of success. And then things would start getting better, right? They would be awarded Scott Stevens at one point, and things would get a lot better for this organization quickly thereafter. And they would win Stanley Cups, 1995, 2000, 2003. They have their Stanley Cups. But it's interesting because they had that really rough, absolutely terrible go where their record was easily the worst in the National Hockey League. If you looked at all-time records at the time, their run in the late 80s and then throughout the 90s definitely helped their overall win-loss record as a franchise. Though the last 10 years, it's been another dry spell. This dry spell doesn't feel the same as back in the 80s. They haven't been as bad as that team was back in the 80s, but it's been a long time since we had a New Jersey Devils squad that really felt like a contender. In fact, the last time that they went to a Stanley Cup final, it was more of a surprise than an indication that they were a contender. So, their all-time leading scorer is Patrick Elias. To the surprise of no one, 1,240 games played, 408 goals, 617 assists, 1,025 points. He is easily the best forward they've had, although Jack Hughes at some point could eclipse that. John McClain, 934 games, 347 goals, 354 assists, 701 points, and a big part of a team that would turn things around and get things going and win themselves some championships. Travis Zajac, 1,024 games, 202 goals, 348 assists for 550 points as a Devil. Kirk Muller, 556 games, 185 goals, 335 assists, 520 points. He was, of course, the number 2 draft pick behind Mario Lemieux. Scott Gomez, 606 games, 123 goals, 361 assists, 484 points. Scott Niedermeier, 892 games, 112 goals, 364 points, 364 assists, 476 points. The interesting thing with Niedermeier was, even though he's that high on the all-time list, we always felt that his numbers were suppressed a bit playing in the New Jersey Devils' defensive style of hockey. And then he went to Anaheim, and the point totals he put up there showed us, Niedermeier likely would add a bunch more points. However, fewer championships, if not being employed by the Devils. Bobby Holik, 786 games, 202 goals, 270 assists, 472 points. His time in New Jersey would end with an expensive contract he signed with the New York Rangers, which didn't work out that well for the Rangers. Aaron Broughton, time is combined between Colorado and New Jersey. 581 games, but these points are just with New Jersey, but he did play with Colorado too. 581 games, 147 goals, 283 assists, 430 points. He is the brother of Neil Broughton. Scott Stevens, 956 games, 93 goals, 337 assists, 430 points. And hits, and more hits. That was the name of the game with Scott Stevens. Zach Parise, 502 games, 194 goals, 216 assists, 410 points. The all-time leading scorer for the Colorado Rockies, Wilf Paymont, 257 games, 106 goals, 148 assists, 254 points. And for the Kansas City Scouts, it was Guy Chiron. Played 129 games for them, 40 goals, 73 assists, 113 points. Remember, Kansas City was only in the league for 2 years. Their all-time wins leader is Chris Terreri. It is not. It is Marty Brodeur. 688 wins for Brodeur, but I do remember when Terreri was the starter. 118 wins for him in his career. Corey Schneider, 115. Glenn Chico Resch, 67. That includes Colorado in that one. And Keith Kincaid, 61 wins altogether with the New Jersey Devils. Their retired numbers list. Ken Danico's number 3 is retired. Scott Stevens number 4. Scott Niedermeier's number 27. Marty Berdeur's number 30, as well as Patrick Eliash's number 26. So pretty expansive list, considering again where they were back in the 80s. Five retired numbers. That's pretty impressive. Their playoffs since 2000, and again, I kept everything the same from the previous videos. 2000, of course, they won the Stanley Cup that year over Dallas in the final. Then they went to the final in 2001 and lost to Colorado in 7. The 2000 and 2001 Stanley Cup finals were both fantastic. 2002, they lost in the first round against Carolina in 6. Clearly took that personal because in 2003, they win the Stanley Cup again. 2004, they lost in the first round against Philadelphia in 5. 2006, they lost against Carolina in 5 in the second round. 2007, they lose in the second round again, this time against Ottawa in 5. 2008, they lost in the first round against the New York Rangers in 5. 2009, they lost in the first round against Carolina in... No, it was 7. Sorry, I got you. 2010, they lost in the first round against Philadelphia in 5. And then in 2012, they get all the way to the Stanley Cup final. And what was seen as a last hurrah for Marty Brodeur. And in that final, they pushed the LA Kings to 6 games. I think it was the toughest out the Kings had that year. So yeah, they lost in the final, didn't make the playoffs again until 2018. In the first round, they lost against Tampa Bay in 5. That was the year that Taylor Hall had a pretty darn good year, and there was a lot to talk about there. So their arena is the Prudential Center. Their coaching history, they've had 20 coaches in New Jersey. They've had 29 coaches overall, including Kansas City and Colorado. Billy McMillan was their coach, straddled the Colorado and New Jersey eras, had a record of 41, 112, and 27. Yeah. Lindy Ruff, their current coach, a record of 46, 76, and 16. Their first goal in New Jersey, Don Lever at 2:21 of the first period in a 3-3 tie against the Penguins, a team they would fight for Mario Lemieux. Most recent goal was scored by Fabian Zetterlund at 6:57 of the third period in a 5-3 loss against the Detroit Red Wings. Their all-time penalty minutes leader is Ken Danico with 2,560 in his career. Their season records, Brian Gionta, the all-time goal-scoring leader with 48 in 2005-2006. Considering the neutral zone trap and just the defensive style of the team, and then, even when they were scoring, was still scoring by committee, it is not that surprising. They've never had a 50-goal scorer. Their assists all-time, Scott Stevens with 60 and 93-94. Points leader all-time, Patrick Eliash with 96 in 2000-2001. Penalty minutes in a season, Christoph Olawa with 295 in 97-98. Olawa was there for a reason, and it wasn't to score goals. The wins, this is a record across the NHL. Marty Brodeur with 48 wins in 2006-2007. Their best draft picks, I mean, Brodeur would still be one of the best draft picks, but he's a first rounder, so I don't usually go with first rounders. 51st overall in 1994 was Patrick Eliash. That same year at 233rd, they drafted Steve Sullivan. Always dropped, always undervalued because of his size. 106th overall in 1980 was Aaron Broughton, so that's the Colorado Rockies. 1981, they drafted Bruce Driver, 108th, which again is the Colorado Rockies. Driver would come in and play for the Devils, was a pretty good defenseman for them. 1992 at 186th, they draft Stefan Yell. Good, solid, bottom 6 guy who played almost 1,000 games in his career. At 145th in 1983, they drafted Vyacheslav or Slava Fetisov. And Fetisov had an amazing run with New Jersey. In 2016 at 162nd, they draft Jesper Bratt. Bratt's a pretty big deal now in New Jersey. 2018, drafting 141st overall, Yegor Sharangovich. Sharangovich with a great year this year. Not bad for a guy drafted 141st 4 years ago. 1984, drafting 107th, they drafted Kirk McLean, who they would then trade to the Vancouver Canucks. And that was a pretty good deal for the Canucks. Patrick Sundstrom would come back the other way, and Greg Adams was in there with Kirk McLean in that trade. Now, first-round picks that played less than 100 games. There was just one before they were the New Jersey Devils. They drafted Rocky Trottier at 8th in 1982. He played 38 games in the NHL. 1986, drafting third, it was Neil Brady. He played 89 games in the NHL. In 1988, drafted 12th, Corey Foster, played 45 games. Drafting 18th in 1989, Jason Miller, ended up playing 6 games in the National Hockey League. 1994, drafting 25th, Vadim Sherifyanov, ends up playing. He played 92 games. I like Sherifyanov, didn't last very long in the NHL. JF Domfus, drafted 24th overall in 1997. He played 6 games in the NHL. 1999, drafted 27th overall, Ari Ahonen. And he was a goaltender we heard so much about for so long, and then nothing. He never played in the National Hockey League. Now, of course, he was behind Marty Brodeur, but still, the thought process was, well, he'll go somewhere else. He's got to make it to the NHL. It just didn't happen. 2001, drafted 28th overall. They drafted Adrian Foster. He didn't play in the NHL. Drafting 30th overall in 2006, Matthew Carenti. He ends up playing 34 games in the NHL. Drafted 29th in 2012, Stefan Matteau, who I think it's pretty safe to say won't come back and play in the NHL. I say safe to say because he's played 92 games. It's technically possible. 2014, drafting 30th overall, is John Quenville, who ends up playing 42 games in the National Hockey League. So they've been pretty good at the draft table, and they're a team that is young, and they're up and coming, and maybe the next time out when I do a history video, we'll have more playoffs to discuss. The playoff situation hasn't changed from where it was the first time that I did. No, the second time that I did their team history, and there's just the one addition since the first time I did their playoff history, which would be the 2018 Stanley Cup playoffs. So there you go. The history of the New Jersey Devils. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.